Zara Mensa had interpreted wars disguised as peace talks, divorces dressed up as asset negotiations, and lies so polished they gleamed under conference room lighting. In 8 years of simultaneous interpretation, she had learned one rule above everything else: stay invisible, stay neutral, and never let what you hear reach your face. She was about to break every single one of those rules. It started with a phone call at midnight Paris time. Her agency. Frantic. The interpreter booked for a private business summit in Seoul had pulled out. Food poisoning, or so they said. The delegation was Nigerian. The hosts were Korean. The brief was thin, closed-door summit, 1 day, possibly 2, private consortium. The fee being offered was not thin at all. Zara had looked at the number twice. Then she had packed her bag. She landed in Seoul 14 hours later with carry-on luggage, a pressed blazer, and the particular brand of exhaustion that only comes from sleeping upright over 8 time zones. A black car was waiting. The driver did not greet her by name. He knew only her seat number from the flight manifest. Zara noticed.
She got in anyway.
The building was in Gangnam.
No saini. No lobby branding.
Just clean steel, tinted glass, and a door that opened before she reached it. Inside, a composed man in a gray suit introduced himself as Mr. O and handed her an NDA that was frankly insulting in its thickness. She signed it. He fitted her with an interpreter's earpiece, showed her to a glass booth overlooking a long conference table, and told her the session would begin in 4 minutes. She had just enough time to notice that the room below was filling with men who all carried themselves the same way: expensive suits, still eyes, and the specific stillness of people who had learned very early that showing emotion was the same as showing weakness. Then the door at the far end of the room opened, and Kwon Tae-Rin walked in. He was tall.
Lean.
He moved without urgency, like a man who had never once in his life been made to rush. He wore a dark suit with no tie, and he sat at the head of the table without greeting anyone, without nodding, without performing the small social rituals that other men use to remind the room they exist. He simply sat. And the room, a room full of powerful men, adjusted itself around him like water finding its level. He said nothing for 30 seconds. Zara had interpreted for senators, for CEOs, for a president's chief of staff who once reduced a translator to tears. She had never felt a silence quite like that one. Then the session began, and she began her work. For the first 20 minutes, it was fine. Trade language, market access, distribution frameworks. Zara's voice flowed through the earpieces of the Nigerian delegates smooth and precise, the way it always did. This was muscle memory. This was what she was paid for. Then the Korean shifted. It was subtle at first, the kind of thing only someone truly fluent would catch. The phrasing tightened. Certain words started appearing between the official sentences like splinters beneath skin. Corridor 7. Unresolved obligations. The matter of the white sleeve. Zara kept her voice even. She interpreted only what she was supposed to interpret, the surface conversation, the official layer. But her hands had gone still on the desk in front of her. Because what she was hearing beneath the surface was not trade language. It was not commerce. It was the architecture of something much older and much darker, spoken in the clipped, coded dialect of men who had entire conversations in what they chose not to say out loud. She kept her face neutral. She kept her voice smooth. And across the room, without appearing to move at all, Kwon Tae-Rin turned his eyes toward the glass booth. If you are new to this channel, this is exactly the kind of story we live for: slow burn, high stakes, and a woman who refuses to fold. Subscribe, hit the like button, and drop in the comments. Would you have taken that flight? Now, let's get back to Zara. The session ended. Zara packed her earpiece, picked up her bag, and walked toward the exit with the calm efficiency of a woman who had somewhere else to be. She had almost reached the door when Mr. O appeared beside her, not blocking her, exactly. Just present. Just there. He told her the hotel had been upgraded. He told her a car was waiting. He told her that her return flight had been rescheduled to accommodate a second day of sessions. Zara told him she had not agreed to a second day. Mr. O smiled with the patience of a man who had delivered uncomfortable news to difficult people for a living. He held out a card. On it was a number, a revised figure for the extended engagement. Zara looked at the number. She looked at the door. She looked back at the number. She told herself it was just one more day. The hotel suite was extraordinary. A living room, a bedroom, a view of Han River that made Paris feel like it was apologizing. There were clothes hanging in the wardrobe in her size. Not flashy, just precise. Like someone had looked at her and understood her. Zara found that more unsettling than if they had gotten it wrong. She opened her laptop. She searched the building's address. Nothing came back. She searched Kwon Tae-Rin. A single business profile appeared, sparse, polished, deliberately uninformative. A photograph from a Seoul charity gala 3 years ago. Dark suit. Unreadable expression. A woman beside him whose face had been blurred in every version of the image she could find. Zara closed the laptop. She called Emeka, the delegation's senior aide who had arranged her last-minute booking. He answered on the second ring, relaxed and unbothered. He told her to take the money and stop overthinking. The Koreans were serious businessmen. Everything was above board. She had nothing to worry about. She asked him if he had noticed the references to Corridor 7. A pause. Then, Zara, you're an interpreter, not an analyst.
Do your job.
She hung up. She lay on top of the 500 thread count sheets in the dark and played the session back in her head. Corridor 7. The white sleeve. Resolve the obligation before the first shipment moves. The words arranged themselves into shapes she did not want to look at directly. She told herself she was overthinking. She told herself one more day was just one more day. She almost believed it. The second session was smaller. Fewer Nigerians. More Koreans. The energy in the room was different, tighter, more compressed, like a conversation happening inside a fist. Zara settled into her booth, fitted her earpiece, and began. 40 minutes in, the Korean man with the scar along his jaw, broad-shouldered, mid-50s, the kind of man who had probably never smiled without a reason, leaned toward the man beside him and spoke in a low, fast undertone. Her microphone caught it perfectly. He said, "The woman in the booth understands everything. Watch her face during the corridor discussion." She reacted. The second man said, "Should we pull her?" The first man said, "After the session." Quietly. Zara did not move. She did not blink. Her voice continued through the earpieces of the Nigerian delegates without a single tremor, smooth, even, professional. She interpreted a sentence about logistics frameworks while her mind was doing something else entirely. She counted the doors.
2.
She counted the security personnel she could see from the booth.
4. Her phone was in her bag.
Her bag was 6 feet away. The room felt very small. Then Kwon Tae-Rin spoke. He addressed the full room in Korean, his voice carrying the particular quality of a man who has never needed to raise it to be obeyed. He said the afternoon session would be postponed. He thanked the Nigerian delegation for their patience. He suggested a 1-hour recess. The room emptied. Tae-Rin did not leave. He stayed seated, turning a pen slowly between his fingers. When the last person filtered out and the door closed behind them, he looked up, directly at the glass booth, directly at Zara. He said in clear, quiet English, "Come down." Zara came down. Because there was no version of not coming down that ended well, and she was smart enough to know it. She pushed through the door at the base of the booth and walked to the edge of the conference table.
He was still seated.
She did not sit. The distance between them was exactly the length of a very long table and felt like considerably less. He looked at her the way people look at something they are deciding the value of. Then he said, "You heard things today you were not meant to hear." It was not a question. Zara had known it wouldn't be. She said, "I interpreted what I was paid to interpret. Nothing beyond that." He tilted his head slightly. "You're very good." Your face gave nothing away. A pause, the kind that had weight in it. Almost nothing. Zara said nothing. He asked where she was from. She told him Nigeria, raised partly in Paris. He asked how long she had been interpreting. She said 8 years. He asked, with something almost like genuine curiosity, whether she had ever found herself in a room like this before. She said, "I have never been in a room like this before." He almost smiled. It didn't quite reach completion, but it was there, a ghost of something that might have been appreciation. He said, "There are 2 men in this building who consider you a problem that needs to be managed. I have, for now, disagreed with them." He leaned back slightly. "I'm telling you this not to frighten you, but because you strike me as someone who prefers the truth to the comfortable version of it." Zara's jaw tightened. She said, "What exactly are you offering me?" He said, 5 more days. 3 additional sessions requiring Korean, English, and French. You will interpret. You'll be compensated in a way that will change the next several years of your life. And when it is done, you will return to Paris, and this building will cease to exist in your memory." She asked, "And if I refuse?" He looked at her, and the look was not a threat. It was almost worse than a threat. It was the calm of a man explaining gravity. "The 2 men who want to manage you quietly will no longer be my concern to restrain." The room was very quiet. Zara pulled out the chair nearest her and sat down. She said, "I have one condition." Something moved across his face, not quite surprise, but adjacent to it. Like he was noting the existence of a thing he had not expected. He said nothing, which she took as permission to continue. She said, "I don't interpret anything that makes me a participant in a crime. The moment you need more from me than language, I walk. And you let me walk." He studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "Agreed." She nodded. She stood. She picked up her bag. At the door, she paused without turning around and said, "For what it's worth, the man with the scar at your left. I don't think he's only concerned about me." She left. Behind her, Kwon Tae-Rin's pen stopped moving. 3 days passed. Zara interpreted. She was professional, precise, and invisible in the way that only truly skilled people can be, present everywhere, noticed nowhere. She moved through sessions like water through stone, carrying meaning from one language to another without leaving fingerprints. But proximity is a slow poison, and she was not immune to it. She watched Tae-Rin the way she watched everything, carefully, quietly, cataloging. She watched him absorb information without expression and release nothing. She watched him end an argument with a single sentence so precisely placed that the other man sat back, as if he had been physically moved. She watched him take a call late one evening, speak for less than a minute in a voice so controlled it barely registered a sound, and then hang up with the stillness of someone who had just made a decision capable of reshaping things. He was the most dangerous person she had ever been in a room with. She was also becoming, in some terrifying and inconvenient way, fluent in him. On the 3rd evening, a session ran long. The building emptied slowly. Zara was in the corridor packing her equipment bag when 2 of Tae-Rin's inner circle passed her without acknowledgement. They did not know she understood Korean. They spoke freely. One of them said, "The merchant agreed to the morning sit-down." The other one said it quietly, with the particular weight of someone delivering a thing they do not enjoy delivering. "The merchant doesn't come to sit down. He comes to finish things." The first one said nothing. The silence between them was its own sentence.
40.
She walked to the car. She rode back to the hotel, without speaking. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and pressed her hands flat against her thighs. Emika's voice in her head, "You're an interpreter, not an analyst. Do your job." Her own voice, quieter, "Then why do you already know what you're going to do?" She picked up the hotel phone. She asked for Mr. O. When he answered, she said, "I need 5 minutes with Mr. Kwon. Tonight. Tell him I have something he'll want to hear." There was a pause. Then Mr. O said, "I will pass the message." Tae-Rin met her in the hotel lobby 40 minutes later. He came alone. That, more than anything, told her he had taken the message seriously. Zara stood when she saw him. She did not waste his time with preamble. She told him exactly what she had heard. The words, the tone, the weight of the silence that had followed. She spoke the way she always worked, precise, clean, without embellishment. When she finished, he was quiet for longer than felt comfortable. Then he said, "Why are you telling me this?" Zara opened her mouth. The honest answer arrived before the careful one. She said, "I don't entirely know. It felt like the right thing." He looked at her the way you look at something written in a language you once knew and have almost forgotten, like he was trying to remember how to read it. He said quietly, "No one in my world does anything without a calculation behind it." She said, "I'm not from your world." He said, "No." And the way he said it was not a dismissal. It was something else, something that sounded, underneath the control of it, almost like relief. A long silence passed between them. Not uncomfortable. Something stranger than that. He said, "The morning meeting has been cancelled." Then, "You should have left when I first gave you the option." She said, "I know." He said, "Why didn't you?" Zara looked at him. She thought about answering. She decided not to. She said goodnight and walked to the elevator. He watched her go. He did not stop her. But before she was through the lobby doors, he made one quiet call. 2 of his best men were reassigned to the floor of her hotel before she reached her room. Not as surveillance. Not as pressure. As a guard.
She did not know.
But somewhere beneath the numbness of the past 4 days, some part of her had already suspected, and had not left anyway. If you are still here, you already know the story has you. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and comment one word that describes Zara right now. We are almost at the end, and it will stay with you. Let's finish this. Day 5 arrived the way last days always do, quietly, without drama, as if it had not been building toward itself the entire time. Zara's bags were packed by noon. The envelope from Mr. O arrived at 12:30, thick, cream-colored, sealed. She opened it, counted it. It was more money than she had earned in the last 2 years combined, and it sat in her hands with the specific heaviness of a thing that is trying to mean more than it should. She put it in her bag, without expression. She spent the afternoon the way she always spent the last hours in a city she was leaving. She walked. Seoul in the late afternoon was golden and enormous and entirely indifferent to her presence, which was exactly what she needed. She walked along Cheonggyecheon, past the stream and the old stone walls, and the people moving through their ordinary lives with ordinary ease, and she tried to remember what Paris felt like. She tried to remember what it felt like to sit in a booth and interpret crop yield negotiations and bilateral trade frameworks and care about getting the phrasing exactly right because the stakes were the right phrasing. She could not quite get there. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. An unknown Seoul number. She knew before she answered. Tae-Rin's voice came through measured and unhurried. He said, "You're walking along Cheonggyecheon. The Blue Bridge." Zara stopped. She looked around. She saw nothing, no one visible, no obvious tail. She said, "Are you having me followed?" A brief pause. "I'm having you protected. There is a distinction." She said, "My flight leaves in 3 hours." He said, "I know." She waited. The stream moved past below her. A child somewhere behind her laughed at something. The sky was going pale gold at the edges. He said, "You warned me. You had every reason not to, and no reason that made practical sense, and you warned me anyway." His voice was still controlled, still measured, but there was something underneath it now, something that had not been there in that first session when he sat at the head of a table and made a room go quiet just by existing. He said, "I don't forget things like that." Zara said, "What does that mean, practically?" He said, "It means that Mr. O's number is yours to keep. Any city, any hour, any situation, you call it, and something moves." A pause. "It also means that if you ever find yourself in Seoul again, not summoned, not pressured, entirely by choice, there is a standing position for a woman who hears everything and says only what she chooses." Zara stood on that bridge with the city moving around her and said nothing for long enough that he might have thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Why does it matter to you? You could find another interpreter." He said, "Yes." And then, after a silence that cost him something, "I could not find another you." It was the most unguarded thing she had heard him say in 5 days. It landed differently from everything else, not like a business proposition, not like a negotiation. Just a man saying a true thing to a woman on a bridge in a city that didn't belong to either of them. Zara breathed out slowly. She said, "I'll think about it." She hung up. She stood there one more moment, the card of the city pressed against her from all sides. Then she walked back to the hotel. She finished packing. She rode to the airport in silence. At Incheon, she moved through security with the practiced ease of someone who had done it in 14 countries. She found her gate. She sat. She did not look at her phone. She told herself, entirely fine. She boarded at 5:45. Window seat. The city spread itself below her in the last of the daylight as the plane lifted, the river catching the sun, the towers going silver, Seoul arranging itself into the kind of beauty that is only visible when you are leaving it. Zara watched it until the clouds took it away. She opened her bag to find something to read, moving past the envelope, past her passport, and then her hand found something that had not been there before. A card. Cream-colored. Embossed, the way only things made for people who need to impress no one are embossed. No name on it. Just a Seoul phone number in clean small type. And beneath the number, in lettering so precise it might have been typeset. The position is permanent. The timeline is yours. Zara read it once. She read it again. She turned it over. The back was blank. She sat with it in her hand for a long time, 30,000 feet above a sea she could not see, flying back toward a life that was going to feel slightly too small for her now, and she already knew it, had already known it since somewhere around day 3, and had stayed anyway. That was the thing she had not said to him on the bridge. That was the answer to the question he had asked in the lobby. Why didn't you leave when you had the chance? Because something in her had already understood, before her mind had caught up with the information, that the most dangerous rooms are not the ones with men in them who want to cause harm. They are the ones with a man in them who makes you want to stay. She placed the card in her passport holder. She looked out the window at the dark. And for the first time since she had landed in Seoul with a carry-on bag and borrowed courage and a rule about keeping her face still, Zara Mensa smiled. Not at the city. Not at the money. Not at the extraordinary strangeness of the week that had just unraveled her carefully ordered life. She smiled at the card. At the number. At the timeline is yours, which was the most romantic thing a man like Kwon Tae-Rin was probably ever going to say to anyone, and which landed, in its way, harder than any declaration she had ever interpreted for someone else. She closed her eyes. Seoul was already behind her. But something told her, quiet, certain, the way the truest things always arrive, it would not stay behind her for long. If this story got you, you already know what to do. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop in the comments. Would Zara go back? Tell us yes or no, and why. We read every single one. Share this with someone who needs a story tonight. And we will see you in the next one.